Evening, folks. Yeah, that time again. Can't believe it. So I've not got any guests on this week. We thought we'd work through some of the backlog of questions that we've got, and also work through any questions that you've got. So while you're watching, take this opportunity to ask you to hit the share button and the like, so we can get this out to a wider audience. And any questions you've got sat there, fire them in. I've got a few bits. First of all, to be honest with you, that I want to run through. One of them that is making me pull my hair out at the minute, to be honest with you, drum filters. So they've sort of cropped in and come into conversations throughout some of the Koi Talk stuff that we've done and on here as well. But I run 8 drum filters in the main growing facility, and my goodness, I find them stressful. Now, I'm just going to obviously choose my wording carefully. These drum filters were not premium ones in the slightest. They're ones that are available on the market still, the very early versions from one supplier. And yeah, I've had them for some time now, admittedly, but the sheer amount of cost in replacement parts, especially the motor, my drums get heavy usage. They're cleaning so frequently. We're talking minutes apart between each clean because of the extreme feeding levels in the pond. So it's not a normal scenario, but it does put product through their paces. And it wasn't, it was no more than after about 2 years we started having to get into all the replacement parts. Cleaning pumps, sort of separate issue. But yeah, now I'm pretty much, I don't think one of them's they must have had 1 or 2 motors per drum replaced, which is becoming an expensive, time consuming job, and causing a lot of stress and hassle to the fish and us, labour costs, everything in the meantime. So where I'm at with it right now, to be fair, a good friend of mine is one of the owners of Profi Drum UK, and he's in charge of the manufacturing side. So he's actually been here today, because it really is one of them things. If you're thinking of going down the drum filter route, from him, I've learned, what is involved in making one to the standards where they are going to be reliable over a longer period of time. And when you actually see it done to that level, you also then obviously get an idea of the costs involved. And I am completely of the opinion that these things cannot be truly done and done well at the cheaper end of the scale. There's always going to be some compromises somewhere, and I think I'm bearing the brunt of that now with what I've got. And to be honest with you, I can't wait to get these ones ripped out. So yeah, that's sort of the route we've gone down. Profi Drum coming in and looking to make a product. One of the great things with them guys as well, there's a lot of flexibility with what they've got going on, which I like. They've got their fixed range of products, but there's also bespoke work there that can be done, because I've got an exact space, and because this is going to be a retrofit job, an exact space that needs that this has got to fit in all existing pipe work and whatnot. So that's what we're looking at. Great service, to be honest with you. And like I say, I've seen how these things are put together, and it's just on a different level. The quality of the parts, everything. And bringing it back to the sort of main point, I'd say, one, really consider if a drum is what you need. In this instance, I do believe it is for me. That's why I'm not looking for an alternative. A sieve would probably be the next consideration for me at that point, to be honest. But I think, all other options are out the window because of the heavy feeding. I mean, one of them, the system's still off at the minute, so it's been out of action now for about 8 hours. And my God, the water is in a hell of a state. And it's just because that's from yesterday's feeding, because we cut that, a while back. So yeah, it's crazy, but don't think that these things are zero maintenance, to be honest with you. They're not. There's a lot of other maintenance we have to do, cleaning out the nozzles constantly, little bits. We get quite a lot of snail egg in the system, and that does work its way through and gets caught in the nozzles. So the screens need servicing quite regularly, and they're not a completely hands-off solution. So yeah, really, assess the reasons for why you're choosing one. If you are looking to rear, intensively with a lot of heavy feeding. Evening, Kev, your profile picture looks well, mate. Then yeah, just consider if this is the right option for you. Systems out there doing a great job. Obviously, Nexus, you're getting an all-in-one system, probably a fraction of the cost. So, is it the right bit of kit? And then, if you do deem it to be the right bit of kit for you, don't cut any corners with it, honestly, because I think you just longer term, short term probably won't be an issue, but longer term, I think it's going to cause you a lot of issues, because I've lived it and I know other people who have, and I just don't think this is a product that can be built on the cheap. So if you're doing it, you've got to go for the good stuff. And from what I've seen, to be honest with you, like I say, I've seen Profidrum literally put together, and they have been the market leader for a lot of years. And to be honest with you, I quite rate the Oasa drum as well. Oasa's a great company. Obviously, a lot of history behind them. Spare parts are always available longer term as well, so you've nothing to worry about there. And they put a great product together. So that's my thoughts on them ones. And then Flukes is going to be the next one, because I'm getting a lot of DMs. And just on that note, guys, honestly, I'm more than happy to get back to any of you and help where I can. But I am exceptionally busy, so if it's a very slow response, I do apologise. I will get to you at some point. Likewise, if I am having a natter with you over Messenger or whatever, and I disappear, it's because most of the time I'm running around like an headless chicken around here. So forgive me for that one. But yeah, the fluke thing. So you may have seen the podcast we did with Jos Dirks, where he spoke about a treatment regime, which was basically using praziquantel-based medication, full dose day 1, then a 50% dose day 2, and a 50% dose day 3. Now, we've been getting a lot of feedback from this. I'm still experimenting with it, to be honest with you. We've been getting a lot of feedback from other people who's used it really successfully and said it's just blown the flukes clean out of the water. So, if you are struggling, it is that time of year. It's a real pain in the arse. It's difficult. I get it. But, this method seems to be working. I'll come back with some results. There's a couple of ponds I'm trialing with at the minute, so we'll see how it does. But does seem to be working well, to be honest with you. It might be the longer term solution, as well as all the other things we discussed in that. Obviously, preparing ponds for treatment beforehand. You know, organic levels are going to play a massive impact with any treatment, and not forgetting, biological filtration action alone is degrading a lot of the treatment. So, that's the one with fluke medications. But if you're out there, guys, and you're struggling, it is that time of year. But give this a shot, and as well as mixing up the medication, if you've been using one frequently, then change to something else. But while we're on that topic, it's one of the thoughts I've been having from some of the information I've been getting from people I've been having discussions with through DM. One thing to be careful of this time of year is absolutely bombarding your ponds with medication, one after the other. When you've not got heat, you're in a tough situation, because medication itself can produce a lot of stress. It is a stress event for fish, and it can knock them back. And you can also end up, with a lot of other problems coming just from the excessive medication, because there's only so much fish can take. So, sometimes it might just be worth taking a step back, calming it down a little bit, making the right medication choices as well. If you've got a lot going on, I could just see in the comments there, here we go. So fluke, trick, chillinella at the minute. That is a giant nightmare. So in that, depending on the levels of the parasites, in that case, what I'd be tempted to do is possibly start by looking there at, you could go with something like outbreaks, to be honest with you, to concentrate. Chillinella is the one I'm worrying about most there, because it's the most aggressive of the lot. So that's the one I wanted to get hit first. Now, you could try potassium permanganate. Issue with that is you've got to get the right, it's got to hit them hard enough to wipe it out, because that has got the potential to wipe out trick and chillinella if you hit the dosage right enough. What it can also do at the right dosage is knock back the fluke at the same time. So that could be a great option there to get your pond medicated with trying to use the least amount of medication. Get the PP. What the PP is also going to do is help lower the organics in the water, which then when you follow on with the fluke treatment after that, the water should hopefully be in a better state and the fluke treatment more effective as well. And yeah, just bear in mind with PP, it's a tough one. You've got dosage rates, typically, I think it's about 6.8 gram per 1,000 gallon stated, but really, really, it does depend on the organic loading in the system, because everyone will find this different. When you add that PP, we're looking at the reaction time. So when that goes from purple to brown, that's your reaction time. Issue there is, let's say, that's going to be affected by the organic load. So you might find it's only lasted 20 minutes or an hour or something like that, depending on what organics you've got going in. That's going to have done very little for them fish parasites. You might knock them back a little bit, but you're not going to clear it up in that amount of time. So what I tend to do in that instance, if it is that kind of dose, I'll use that first dosage personally. And obviously, I'm not saying go out and do this. I tend to use it stronger. So I'm using it more at 10 gram per 1,000 gallon of water. That's when I know there's organic loading in there. And even at that, you're still not going to have the full impact. So, but regardless of the dosage, treat it if you've got a low reaction time, and really you want 4 or 5 hours if you can achieve it. Certainly 3 or 4 is a bare minimum. So if you're struggling with that, treat it day one, and then 24 hours later, give your system a clean. Drop your filters. If there's a Nexus, give the Nexus a run through. Drop that out. Top a bit of fresh water up, and providing the fish look very, happy and comfortable, retreat it 24 hours later at the same dosage, and you're going to expect at that point a much longer dosage time, to be honest. So yeah, it's a tough old challenge. It's a very, very tough time of year. You're not the only ones. If you're watching this thinking, what the hell, what am I doing wrong? We have the same stuff. I've got, I don't actually know how many, but there's probably, over 20 ponds outside that are just at ambient temperatures. And at times it does feel like you're just constantly putting out fires. You can have everything fine, or a couple of batches you might just be working on, and then you turn your back, you've got them right, and another couple's gone down. It's just the nature of the beast this time of year. That's hence why I do bang on. I know it's frustrating because it's costly, but the heat would just take so much stress away and make life a hell of a lot easier. And it just is unfortunate that it is so costly to have it running all the time. But you're not the only ones. But yeah, please just do consider not completely bombarding the fish, because what can happen is if they're going through 2-3 weeks of medication on the bounce, very, very quickly they're going to get exhausted with that, and you're going to cause problems. And what you can't do is just the elevated temperatures are what they need at that point, probably with some salt in there to actually help the fish recover fully from all that process. And what you can also potentially do by wearing the fish down like that, because throughout it, I wouldn't have expected them to be feeding a lot either. So coming out the end of it, you've weakened the fish. They're probably a bit thinner as well. And by weakening them fish, they're more susceptible to more problems. So you can see how it's just a vicious circle that you don't really want to be caught in, to be honest with you. So yeah, tough one, guys. It is a real tough one, but it's one of them times of the year where your skills have to kick in, and you sort of ride the storm and just pray that the sun starts shining and we get into a decent temperature band before as soon as we can. So yeah, that's that one. Like I say, guys, keep any questions coming in. I'm just going to have a flick into the list now and see what we've got sat there. Just bear with me a minute. There we go. Which koi auto feeder would you recommend as best value for money? Right, interesting one. This is an area that is an absolute nightmare, to be honest with you. Let me start at the top and what I'm looking for in a feeder, and then we'll sort of understand it a bit more. So yeah, for me, from a professional end of it, it's all about control. I need the ultimate amount of control when I'm using an automatic feeder. So when I'm making incremental increases, I don't want them to be too big. I need them to be quite granular, so as I don't, affect the system too much, because very quickly, a relatively small increase, but across all the feeds, is adding a lot of extra food into the ponds every day. So that's something I've got to be mindful of. Good spread distribution from the feeder as well, because what I tend to find is the ones that sort of mount on the side of the wall and just drop in against that can encourage that behavior. So they're spending a lot of time around the area around the feeder, because koi learn the cycle, that they know where they get fed. And yeah, what you can also find is, and I've had this constantly with those feeders, when I'm heavily stocked, this is more of a problem when you are heavily stocked, is the constant piling into the side of the pond where the food drops causes massive issues with split fins and raised scales. And it is just raised scales caused by that physical sort of rubbing and knocking action as well. So be very, very careful with those ones. That's why I tend to choose the flicker types that spread it out and they've got a variable spread on them as well. For me, yeah, I need a good hopper size as well because of the feeding levels. So that's not necessarily a problem for people watching this, but for me, when ponds are churning over a kilo a day in feeding, it is quite time consuming when you've got a lot of them. Keep topping them all up, so it is nice to get the food mixers done and have them full for a decent bit of time. So, and then reliability in on all that. The solar panels, the solar powered stuff is quite handy because you can obviously move it around and get to various locations. My absolute best choice, a favorite choice, is the Japanese. It's manufactured by Kamihata. The grey ones, you might have seen them with the solar panel on the top. They are a superb feeder, give me complete control over the feeding cycles, times, spread, everything. They're superb and pretty reliable as well, to be honest, and quite easy to fix when they go wrong. But they are mighty expensive. I think you'll be lucky to pick one of those up for less than £1,000 as it stands, and I understand that is absolute nightmare and just probably out of reach for a lot of people. So then we're looking for alternatives, and in truth, I've been searching for one of these for years now. One did come available last year, but there's been too many sort of supply problems with it. JBL brought out one very similar, based a lot on the Japanese one that I've just mentioned. And I think these were like £350 in the market. I couldn't believe what we're getting for the money, to be honest. Wasn't perfect compared to, and when I say that, that's me being really fussy on, it's only literally the feed increases. So setting that granular feed increase level, the step up was a little bit too big. Didn't have complete control over it. But it wasn't too bad. But for the cost saving, they were absolutely superb, and loads of other things bundled in. They had a temperature probe. The solar panel actually worked far better than the Japanese one throughout winter. That's what I tended to find. I really struggled with the Japanese ones in winter, to be honest. So I've actually retrofitted to have them powered up. But the JBL ones lasted all winter and worked an absolute treat. Great size hopper on them, just a really, really great all-round product, to be honest with you. But I do believe, last year there was supply problems altogether. They're not just getting enough of them into the country, and I do believe now they've also disappeared because of a bit of a manufacturing fault. I did experience it where the actual base of the feeder was developing cracks, even though there'd been no sort of distress incidents to have caused it. And I am led to believe that's an issue they've actually had with the mold that affected certain batches. So it looks like you're going to struggle getting your hands on those this year. So if you can get one, I'd recommend it. But other than that, it sort of leads to the only other flicker one being the EA feeder, to be honest with you. Now, I like a lot of the stuff EA does, but to be honest with you, those things, for a very, very, very basic level, they're all right, but you can't control the spread. Really, you can, two distances, but even the lowest one's absolutely wild. The jump up from one feed, so the 1 second increment in feeding is still too much. When I'm using small pellet, it's like you're literally gone 3 times the amount of food going from 1 second to 2 seconds. And even to be fair, starting some ponds out, the 1 second feed was still too much for the initial phase. So from my perspective, there really weren't a lot of use. However, the battery lasts on them quite well. They're cheap, so it's easy to get them sort of scattered around the place and obviously get a fair few of them in, which is what they've got going for them. So yes, if that's the sort of options that are out there, by all means, it is doable, and probably you're not looking for as much as I am in one of them feeders. So just to deliver them regular feeds throughout the day, especially if you're using a medium sort of size, 5-6 mil pellet, some of them problems are going to go away, and they're really not too bad at that. So I hope that answers the question, but the ones I will stay away from are those that mount on the side of the wall, because just I've seen them cause too many problems. And the last thing you want, to be fair, if you've got quite a few big fish, is them colliding into that wall and causing absolute havoc. To be honest, so yeah, be mindful of that one. Right, let me just have a quick through. There's a pretty decent one. Is it good to use clay? Absolutely. I like using clay. I believe it's good for a lot of reasons. Main one being, for me, I like to use it. I can create a bit of turbidity in the water, especially in summer. So it's obviously not around for very long, but while it's in there, it's just helping kill off a bit of the sunlight hitting the skin. I do believe it's good for skin luster. That's what I like to use it for. Some of the clays as well, the Back to Plus one, I have seen have an impact on sumi development as well. Not across all batches of fish, but in general, I've seen it help out, and that could be to do with one of the trace elements in there, to be honest with you. But yeah, overall, good thing. Obviously, it's a nice flocculant, and when Jos was talking about it on one of the podcasts that we did, it's also good for taking away part of the food source of bacteria and clearing out them small particles. So yeah, great all round. I see no issues in using it. Obviously, people chasing TDS, they sort of got it's not one of the products for them, but I'm not somebody who chases TDS. I'm looking at a lot of other stuff. So yeah, go for it is my opinion on that one. Right, let's see what else we've got. I've just seen one there about Krashigoi or Kigoi, if I can find it. Here we go. Krashigoi or Kigoi, Benigoi or Krashigoi. Which are your personal favourites and why? Crikey. So, personal favourites, I will always say, and this is pretty much where I'm at with koi keeping, any. If it's a good example, that's what tempts me. There's not really a variety I can think of that I would say I wouldn't have, because generally when I've seen good ones, they're all incredibly, enticing. So Krashigoi or Kigoi, again, that's almost, to be honest with you, the difference there is almost so big. It's almost like asking between, I'm going to need that question back on, Steve, please, just to keep up with it. Krashigoi or Kigoi, so that's almost like asking like showa or goshki almost. I know they're both yellow, but very different beasts. Krashigoi is in essence the yellow chagoi. Kigoi is a completely different fish. Kigoi should be super intense, vivid yellow. Not typically got the same bone structure as what Krashigoi do have, so they are very different in that respect. But what's been happening with Krashigoi just recently, with the sort of mango lines that you're seeing and that colour, they are working more towards the Kigoi colour now that was, but getting the power of the body of Karashi, hence from the chagoi blood within them. So yeah, to be fair, still when you see a Kigoi in its absolute form, purest form, with the akame, the red eyes, they do look superb, but there's just very few of them out there, to be honest with you. So the purest line of Kigoi I know of comes from Otsuka Koi Farm, and other than that, yeah, there's a few guys doing the odd bit where it's a little bit in between, but not many. Krashigoi we're seeing loads of now, more and more. I'm big on the Akawa ones this year. You've probably seen it if you've watched the video I did on YouTube. Those things are just phenomenal, what he's doing. Colour, body size, everything. On a recent shipment I had, aside from the batch I'd already got, I bought 10 fish which were from the fish he was keeping for the summer. So I managed to prize them off of him. 10 pieces, and as toe side, they arrived with me at 45 to 47 cm, and I think majority are getting on for 50 centimeters now. They're absolute beasts. And yeah, so I've got quite a soft spot for Karashi, in all honesty, because of the size potential, but I do prefer those deeper yellow ones. And to be honest with you, I've always had a big soft spot for Deutsch Karashigoi, to be honest. The ones when you get the really nice sort of linear scale lines down and look absolutely superb. So yeah, again, I'd go for either, but probably out of them, I'm swinging more towards. I've probably got a softer spot for Karashigoi, in all honesty. Benigoi or Karashigoi, yeah, you can't really choose between them, because if I showed you the best Akawa Karashi I've got right now, and then the best Dainichi Benigoi that I've got from the Red Tiger line, you would struggle to pick it, and the answer would be to have one of each, to be honest with you. So that one's easy sorted. Chagoi or Sorogoi, Yeah, again, Chagoi. I'm not a huge fan of Chagoi, to be honest. And this is, it's sort of like they're one of those fish. They still sell in big numbers, and demand's always really, really strong for them because typically everyone wants one in the pond. But for me, yes, they grow enormous. You know, the Matsue line grows incredibly huge, but I'm more of a fan, believe it or not, of the Marihiro Chagoi. Now, Marihiro is the younger brother of Matsue. They're both Hirasawa family name, and what I naturally presume when I saw Marihiro Chagoi for the first time that he'd just got the parent fish directly from his brother, being probably the biggest Chagoi bloodline that there is, and produce them. Now, before I go into that bit, the reason I sort of go off Chagoi a little bit is when they get this huge size, the bone structure, especially in the head, often lets them down a little bit. There's very few that I see where the head carries enough power to carry the sheer mass of the rest of the body, so it ends up with the head looking a bit small. And bone structure wise, it's not a trait that I like, and not something I like to see in koi of size. So yeah, when I saw the Marihiro ones, the first thing that hit me was as Nisai, they were quite slender fish, but the body power, they had this huge sort of triangular shaped head with big mouths and really prominent backbone running through the middle. And at that point, I knew it was something a bit different. So got asking him. He wouldn't tell me exactly what I'd done, but he basically took the Matsue bloodline as the foundation, his brother's lineage there, and then, or should I say, his family's lineage. And then he'd been tinkering with it, adding other bits in, mixing other bits and bobs. And yeah, to be honest with you, created a different beast. Now, he doesn't have the same sort of numbers of them, but yeah, when I've seen them and seen them big, they're impressive, but it's because the body carries completely differently. More like a lot of the big Karashigoi bodies that we see now, to be honest, from like Akawa and the Sakais and stuff like that. So, yeah, but Chagoi over Sorogoi, again, love is nice Sorogoi when you see one. They're all great when you see good examples. So I wouldn't pick either or there. I'm just, when you see good ones of all of them, you can't knock them. So, yeah, there we go on that one. So just while I'm looking for another question, again, if you can hit that share button, ping this out so we can get it into as many viewers as possible. Let's see what we've got. That's quite a good one. Time here as well. So your content is helping me out massively, so keep it coming. Absolutely, and thank you very much for that. Quick question with ammonia spikes. We just stop feeding, water change, or both? So I might have sort of touched on this before, but it's really got to gauge it because it depends on what's causing the spike. Now, ammonia, I always say, is one that I want to get out of there as quickly as possible because it's nasty and does a lot of damage quickly. But I suppose it depends on the size of the spike that you've got going on. Now, if you've got heat, again, you can get yourself out of this really quickly. Just, in the higher water temperatures, the bacteria cycles a lot faster, and you can really shift an ammonia spike quite quickly with that one, to be honest. But yeah, so if you're unheated, let's say, sort of this time of year, and you've got a nasty spike, yeah, you've got to try and figure out what's been the cause. So if you've increased feeding slightly, it'd be a good idea to scale back, in my opinion. Probably not stop completely if it's just a minor spike, because what the process possibly is, or not stop for too long. You want to try and get it under control, but what you've also got to allow is the filter to adapt to the feeding level. So it might be, and this I know I've spoken about, it might be your transition from sort of winter into spring, where your filter's sort of waking up and you've just overdone it with that feed a little bit. So cutting it back or stopping it, but only short term, get the spike under control. But what you've got to be careful of is that obviously you're not just going to hit that increased feeding again and have the same problem. So it's one to monitor. I'll be one more. Water changing, I'm always, again, depending on the level, I'm skeptical of, because you've got to be careful with the water that you're putting in there, and you're not going to do any more damage from it. And again, what is it? Is it a mature system it's a very temporary lapse? So just easing back or stopping that feeding for a day or two might just pull it back in line. If it's new pond syndrome, it's a very different beast that we're dealing with at that point, because you've got an immature filter. So there's a lot more unknowns, and it's a different scenario. It's going to be it's going to set in and stay there for a lot longer than a mature pond just having a temporary blip, to be honest with you. So yeah, cut back or only stop feeding short term, just get it under control. If it's a small spike, obviously it's a heavy spike, you've got to deal with that a bit more. But if you've not got salt in there, to be honest with you, you'd be better off using bacterial-based products to seed the filter, and then probably using something like zeolite, which doesn't get mentioned a lot. Zeolite's just going to absorb all that ammonia up really, really quickly and get you out of a fix fast. So I'd probably look along them lines. But just bear in mind, you know, if you're doing big water changes, all that fresh water could upset the system further and rock the filter a bit more. So yeah, be mindful. But as ever, it's not so easy just to give a straight answer because there's a lot of variables, and I am mindful of giving advice that, you know, case by case, it's going to be slightly different. But yeah, let's try with that one. Let's say just ease it back. But yeah, new pond syndrome, bit of a different scenario with that one. So right, next question. Can you just take that one off the screen for me, Steve? Lost track of it. Oh, I've got it. All right. I'll knock it back on. There we go. Right, next one. Sanke versus showa. Is the difference just black on their head? Absolutely not with that one. So I'm going to take this right back to the beginning. There's a lot of variables in this. So the very, very basic one, if you're watching this and you're really at that level where you're trying to, you know, figure out which is which, the very basic rules, and I always use this one: Sanke spots, showa's blocks. And that's what we're looking at, the sumi on the body of the fish. If you strip it right back and look at Shiro, Sori and Beko, which in essence, if you strip the Beni away, that's what you've got, you can see a big difference there. You know, Beko's, you're looking for these smaller sort of nicely placed bits of sumi. Shiro, Sori, Showa, you've got the big heavier blocks. So that's the sort of layout of the sumi. You've got the sumi in the fins being different. Obviously, you've got thicker block of sumi for showa generally, and the more lines of sumi for Sanke, again on a very basic level. And yes, on the head, sumi on the head, typically you're not going to get a lot of sumi on the head with a Sanke, but you can have sumi on the head. Whereas showa, you're expecting to see it, and probably quite a lot, to be honest with you. There are fish, however, which do tread these lines very closely. I mean, if we go back to an old lineage, Jinbei, I mean, the farm's not in operation anymore, but Jinbei sumi was incredibly heavy for Sanke, where it would almost look showa-like at times. But you've got to look for them other factors at that point, so how it's sitting on the head. But like I say, Sanke can have it on the head, but where you're probably going to see it, you know, on the top part of the head, the back part, to be honest, rather than closer to the mouth. Although again, seen that before, just not in big cases. Matsunosuke Sanke can look a little bit that way, to be honest with you, where it's a lot heavier. But you can get all variations. Marido, there's been fish like it. So yeah, it's a challenge, that one. Obviously, always helps when you typically know the breeder the fish has come from. You can use that to sort of trace back. So you know, just as an example, if you had a very sparsely sumid showa that you thought was possibly a Sanke, but then you know it came from Isakoi farm, Issa only breeds showa and kohaku, so we know it's not likely to be Sanke. So there's little guides like that you can use to help you sort of figure out what's what, to be honest. But yeah, tough one. But just think Sanke can, and to be honest, Sanke can look like they've got Motogoro, the thick blocks of sumi in the fin as well. So it's really the full history is going to help you out, but it's bringing it all together in the end. And yeah, seeing how many of them boxes it sort of takes. But there are some that will always trouble you, to be fair, because it can be challenging. And that's when, to be fair, knowing the breeder is the bit that can help really identify what's what there. So yeah, good question. The one here. What are your thoughts on the eyes on Matsue Koi with regard to the body shape? Yeah, interesting one. So big fan of Matsue Kohaku. I mean, it's a great line based on the Sanke bloodline, which, you know, way back in the time, it was the original big growing jumbo Kohaku bloodline, to be honest with you, the dominant force that a lot of kohaku were built off of. Yeah, love Matsue Kohaku. I mean, they are great qualities. The bodies are superb. it's a real jumbo lineage in what they can produce more often than not. They're consistently producing big fish, so it's genetic trait of the lineage. Skin quality, absolutely superb, to be honest with you. They're not a lineage where, I mean, take Hoshikin, for example. Hoshikin produces quite a lot of quirky patterns. It's the style of the breeder. It's the style of his fish. Matsue is not like that. I think it's more of a structured sort of bloodline, but whenever I've had the fish here, they've always been great. I say very good growers. The eyes is an interesting one because one of the old quirks of the Sanke lineage was these slightly protruded or slightly bigger eyes as well that look slightly protruded, which it's case by case. It's not everyone's bag. It's not always my bag, to be honest with you, when I see it. But likewise, it's not in every fish. It's something you can tend to see in them more often than not. But yeah, I think the other qualities far outweigh it, to be honest with you. And I think it's going to come down to personal taste, to be honest with you, whether it's something that you like or not. But overall, that is a superb bloodline that I can't really say anything bad about, to be honest. So yeah, good question. I like that one. That's an interesting one. What are your thoughts on Israeli koi and specifically Deutsch Achiba? Now, I have always said if I had to sell Israeli koi, I'd probably give up, to be honest with you. And that's not being a snob. That's the inner part of what I enjoy from koi, because they do produce some attractive fish. Personally, some of the sort of health part, not the wife's watching. Hope kids are not doing her head in too much. Typically for me, there's a history, a sort of sketchy history with the health, sort of on the trade side of the fence. We're all aware of. My dad dealt in Israeli koi, so I can speak from first-hand experience here and his shared experience. And back in them days when they were a bit of a living nightmare, to be honest with you. And yes, I think that's got better over the years from what I've seen. But for me, and this is where it is going to sound snobbish, I look at the things I enjoy. I bang on here constantly in all the content I do about body shape. And this, I believe, is the area where it sets the Japanese koi apart from so many others, to be honest with you. So that body, yeah, people can produce nice, attractive looking skin. You can further enhance that with hitting with a load of colour food if you want to prior to sale. You can create relatively nice patterns as well. But body is the king in high quality koi, and the Japanese do it so flawlessly. Whether that's just from the line just passed down, or it's the way they see koi, I think is the thing here. You can't sort of take away from them or emulate that easily. It's all this experience that they've got in the lineages and the breeding, where the body shape, and it's because it's everything that they're looking at. So body is just of such importance throughout it. And this is what I see. Then we've got obviously the size, the genetics, the extreme end of koi. I mean, there's probably in the cheaper end, you might see differences where you think I can't really tell here. Then I probably agree with that. But when we start moving up the scales, the Japanese are producing serious quality in quantity. And when we move up the ladder further up, they are just producing koi on levels that nobody is emulated in the slightest. So, that for me, just with Israeli fish, I think is one of the biggest, most inherent problems is the bodies just aren't good enough. We're talking in the head shape, quite a long, pointy face they tend to have in general. And certainly with the female stuff, they get quite weighty and gut heavy underneath, which is all bone structural type stuff. And it's lineage and genetics there playing its part. So for me, they're never going to cut it, because until the day where that is sort of rectified, I just couldn't consider them to be truly high quality fish, because it's the big differentiating factor. And that's me saying that as a purist, obviously. But when it comes to cheap koi as well, the cheap Japanese koi out there as well, which I just think are far stronger, healthier, and more robust overall. And obviously from a side where I've pretty much been brought up in Japan, they're a big part of koi for me as well. So just to see it anywhere else would almost feel like I was cheating on them, to be honest with you. There are other farms across the country across the world. Sorry, I mean the guys out in Poland, Yoshiki Go. I mean Jos is doing some phenomenal stuff with his breeding out there, especially in some of the non-go Sanke varieties. doing a great job, but it's still always the differentiating factor is that body. And again, in some of them varieties, he's done a superb job with that. But yeah, overall, that's the main factor that sort of always steers me away from anything else I see. It's because, you know, that, and then fish you see all the way in them posters behind it. You know, very rare to see that kind of quality at farms outside of Japan. And that's just a few fish on a poster. And trust me, there is hundreds of fish at that kind of level kicking around at these farms across Japan. So yeah, that's where I'll always stick and where my heart will always lie. And but hats off to anybody else outside Japan who gives it a shot, because so typically the climate, they're always working against it, which Japan is sort of blessed with. There's not the decades of experience that gets passed down either, and they're always competing against the Japanese market as well, which is an uphill struggle and can affect values. So I've always got a lot of respect for anyone else giving it a shot, but for me, I say I'll always lie with that place. So right, I'm just going to jump into tonight's comments, see what we've got, see if there's any questions in there. Is there any particular standout? You've had Steve there in the background. Oh, go on, I've got one. It's all right. Is it normal for Beni Kikokuryu to go very dark and have the original colour only slightly showing through? Mine has darkened up a lot over the past 2 years, and most notably after fluke last year. Right. So yeah, Beni Kikokuryu, I mean, they're absolutely wild. Remember, the origin of Beni Kikokuryu is Kohaku. There's a lot of that blood sat in there, and Kohaku are probably the most unstable variety that there is. Drive people absolutely bonkers because Kohaku, Kikokuryu, the Beni types, whenever you get a top example of them fish, they just look insane. But yeah, overall, to be honest with you, they're so unstable. You would be pushed to see me spending any sum of money on certainly on the Kohaku front because they're just too unstable. But coming back to the Kikokuryu a bit, this would really depend on the bloodline that it comes from, because again, there are very specific traits. So you see the Kikokuryu where you've got the let's call it like the gunmetal grey sort of full base to the fish. Now they can be really, really things. So Marasaka's was the first one that really sort of opened my eyes with this. So what happened? I got a load of Tatishita from him one year, quite high level ones. The Kikokuryu come in, and I'm selecting through for fish to grow on through, you know, the similar factors I've used for other breeders, and I just wasn't happy with what I was looking at. They all looked a bit too dark. The sort of Benny was covered, as sort of saying in the question, and the metallic shine was good. There was nice attributes to them, but I just wasn't all there. And at that point, I literally said, I'm just going to have to keep all these, because if I release them now, they'll likely sell for a loss because nobody's going to want to buy them. And I got growing these things, and as the sort of heat hit them and they started growing, I was just blown away with what happened. The darkness all dropped out of them. The Benny came through stronger, and by the end of the summer, most of those fish that I would have rejected at that point were absolutely incredible examples. So it was a massive learning curve for me, that one. But then naturally they get to that point, and yes, there's going to come a part where typically they want to start darkening again. So it's at that point where you're going to have to select the right kind of fish to make sure that doesn't potentially happen. But there is the potential for that, for them to over darken without a doubt, because there's a lot of sumi there waiting. But again, this is going to vary breeder to breeder. They've all got slightly different sumi styles. Ikarashi Azumi is another very prominent Kikokuryu breeder. He's developing a slightly different way. You tend to get two sort of types from there, to be honest with you. One more similar to Marasaka, and one a little bit more similar to Iokia, which is the one I'll move on to. So they can be the same. So typically when you're selecting probably the Ikarashi Azumi ones, I'd want to go for one a bit lighter when they're younger. But the Marasaka ones, I don't mind keeping the darker ones because I know what they can do. The difference with the Marasaka one, if those fish would have stayed small and not grown at the rate I had them growing at, the likelihood is that process of the lightening up might not have happened in the first place, and they'd have just stayed darker and got increasingly darker from that point on. So, you know, that's always a thing when we're discussing fish development and future potential. There is a variable in there of the rate at which it's going to grow and the conditions that it's going to grow in. which is always worth bearing in mind. And yeah, moving on, Aoki. So Aoki was where the original kikokuryu, Benny Kikokuryu, was created. He was the master of it, the guy that made it, and still to this day, I mean, probably he is the best producer of it, not probably. But the style's totally unique. They do look like a metallic Benny Kohaku in the structure. Some of them almost Deutsche Showa-esque as well when you see it, just with the metallic shine. So yeah, his are just unreal. But what I've seen with those, so I tend to get when these come through, it's more that they are sort of silver and white and sort of got the Benny on them, but there's very little sumi showing through. But very quickly the sumi comes. I'm talking possibly in a 3 to 6 month period, you see the early signs of it. After 12 months, it can be a completely radical transformation with them. It's insane. And the biggest sort of one, sorry, just coming back to that, Terry, honestly, it might change again. So you might find as it warms up, it could drop back off. It is the sort of one of the things with kikokuryu, you're going to take you on that kind of journey where it can get a bit frustrating. But so just to drop back into the Aoki one. So yeah, what I've seen is the sumi developing in this phenomenal way where, you know, imagine a sort of spotted pattern that's got silverfish, red spotted pattern. And then all of a sudden the sumi starts coming. The sumi comes in a way where it tends to completely avoid the Benny, doesn't overrun it, just forms and completely forms around it as if there's a block there stopping it from going over the Benny. I've seen that happen so constantly. When I first saw it, I thought, is that just, you know, a chance? But I've seen it happen so many times now to say that is a very strong trait of the Aoki Benny Kikokuryu. But also seeing the ones that are, you know, very few of them admittedly the sort of more gunmetal colour, and that even fading off, and then this other process happening. So remarkable variety. Like I say, there are some consistent traits, but even still, instability with them is another, you know, consistent trait of kikokuryu. So yeah, just strap in and enjoy the ride basically with them ones. Right, let's see what we've got here. I'm setting up a trickling this week. Would you trickle into the drum, Draco, or into the bio? Right, Tony. So would I trickle it? If you are adamant on doing it, I would trickle into the drum, to be honest with you, just to give that water a chance to mixture a little bit more before it gets to your bio. But if you've been watching these, you probably know what I'm going to say next. Just make sure that you're happy with the quality of the water that you're putting in and there's no problems. I've seen the guys at Elite Koi have been getting big into the water testing, working with Yoss as well, and some new testing equipment he's got himself, and pulling up problems, especially with sort of copper in no end of people. There's people sort of flocking in there now, having their water screened and finding all these underlying issues that if you're trickling, that's going to become the norm with your water in your pond. So yeah, make sure you're really on top of that stuff if you're going to choose to do it. Again, from what I've been saying, wouldn't massively be my preference because I just don't think the quality of the water overall is good enough. So I'd just probably choose to get some sort of auto top-up system done there and just top up on demand what's needed and still make sure it's incredibly well purified at that point. So yeah, good question. Next one, firing through them. Ginga, who is the go-to breeder? What qualities do they have, and what is the parentage to produce them? Christ, Ginga. So yeah, I know from the Benny Ginga. I mean, Matsue Kawabaki's played a big part in these, and from Benny Ginga because I've been with Katsumi when he's been trying to buy parent fish for him. So he's typically used Matsue Kawabaki, typically looking at a female and crossed with sort of like Benny Kajaku into the lineage, which tends to be the form. There's a lot of Kajaku blood in Benny Ginga. It is a major part of it. That's why you can see some, again, Aoki, just been talking about, in one of the prominent players in Benny Ginga production, to be honest, and you can see some treading the line between being Kajaku and Benny Ginga, to be honest with you. It can be a very fine line at times with them, but for the plain Ginga, not loads of people doing this. Marihiro's been a good one just recently, to be honest with you. They've been doing quite an interesting job with him. There's a few other breeders here and there, but I'd probably say the most dominant one with the black and white Ginga has been being my hero off the top of my head. I can't think of any more at the minute. And go-to breeder is probably going to be the one. Ginga, Aoki, without a doubt, he's mastered that one as well. Not massive numbers of them though. They're quite a tough one to produce. What qualities do they have to have? You're looking there, really. I mean, it can be a tough one, cost of the blood, body, just as ever you're going to be looking for, but you really want to be focusing on metallic shine and possibly not getting one that's too dark, because if it is Matsue Kawabaki based, Matsue Kawabaki is tying into the whole kohaku lineage as well. So you can see there's going to be possibly some radical changes to be had, and probably an ever darkening variety as well. So yeah, hi there, VW driver from the Netherlands. Yeah, they're going to darken, so possibly go for the lighter ones, and pay attention to that metallic shine, because it's going to be everything there. Benigoi, slightly different one. Again, they're going to darken, but probably a bit lighter when they're younger, and focus on the quality of that Benny as well. You want it really to be punching and looking good. So good question. What else have we got? Just bear with me a moment, folks. That was a nice comment there. Rather support UK breeder than Israeli. Absolutely 100% with you on that one, without a doubt. There we go. Food-based one from Ross. What would be the minimum pond temperature you would feed Sake Balance? To be honest with you, I'd be quite comfortable feeding Sake Balance around sort of 12 degrees. I don't think that's what they state on the packaging, but that's what I've been using. I'm going to say, obviously, for all the praise I've given to Sake Akari, the multi-season one is the one that I probably would rate the absolute least out of the whole range. From using it over this winter, I'm not really sure what that food's bringing to the table, to be honest with you, overall. It's a bit of a weird one because it's got colour enhancement mixed in, which I wouldn't have chose to have, as well as sort of being obviously multi-season. It can be all year round, but it's primarily based on being a winter food because of the wheat germ. It's very high quality wheat germ in it. It's wheat germ in a kernel. As with anything they do, it's going to be the best. But just from feeding it, I noticed that it tended to throw probably a little bit more secondary colour in fish that I wasn't expecting to see from it, that I wouldn't even had from feeding the sake colour on its own. It might have been because of the lower temperatures, quite possibly. But just overall, I'd probably be choosing at the temperature ranges we're talking about. When it sort of gets below 12, you're cutting through right back anyway. Sake Balance isn't too high in fat either, so that's what I'd be choosing to use probably from now on. I'll keep a bit of multi-season around, just for a few instances, but yeah, I'd be comfortable at them temperatures. And certainly now, as things are, Sake Balance should be absolutely fine to be using, and it really is a great all-round food, that one, for the price. Right, let's see what else we've got. I can't believe 50 odd minutes has already passed. Let's have a look. Oh, Ian there, just another one reiterating what I've just said. And I know this is a conversation I've had with him privately as well. What are your thoughts on Trickling, Trucklight, good or bad? Again, just to reiterate, generally I'm saying bad unless you know the true extent of the source water. And by that, I'm talking, knowing the full degree of what's in there, knowing that when you're purifying, you're removing all that as well. Unless you're doing that, I'd stay away from it. Still purify to the best of your knowledge, but also just top up on demand. Not only that, I do like, too much fresh water can create, we're trying to create an ecosystem. This is how I'm keeping koi. I'm wanting the filter, everything in there to do its job. And, too much fresh water all the time can interfere with that. It's a fine balance. You need some, absolutely, because you can't just rely on leaving the system alone. There's always going to have to be some fresh water to help counteract organics, reduce nitrate and things like that. But the trickling, unless you know the quality of the water is on par with, the super stuff we see in Japan, where they're literally using water that's made from snow. It's about as pure as it gets. So be careful with that one, because it can do far much more harm than good. Let's have a look. Just one more time into the flukes. Do you think there's an increase in fluke this year? If so, the best treatment that works? No, I don't think there's an increase. I think it's the same as every year. But again, please, if you haven't watched it, flick over to the Koi Talk YouTube channel, find the interview that I did, the podcast we did with Jos Dirks, and just listen to our discussion there on it. You know, this is more an education here on how we're using it. You know, just when we speak and spoke to Jos about how those treatments are performing, you know, packets of medication are clearly stating to give sort of 7 days between the treatments. Well, you know, it's very broad advice that's being given out, and rightly so, because obviously the manufacturer is potentially, you know, on the hook if something goes wrong there. They've got to cover their arse, and that's obviously what's happening. But yeah, what we're looking at is really that treatment. How do we know that it's not just completely being consumed by the bacterial loading in the pond, the organic loading in the pond within 24 hours? So it's only had a mild impact, knocked the flukes back, and that's why they're coming back, and we're constantly seeing it all going backwards and forwards like that. So, you know, knowing the correct dosage for your pond, it could literally be that every pond needs a slightly different dose and variation for it, but it completely makes sense what you did, sort of dose a lesser dose then for the next 2 days to really make sure they've had the full brunt of it. And just the best example I can see, you know, take away the fact it being a fluke medication, look at potassium. Potassium is varying completely depending pond on pond. That standard dosage that goes on them packets is going to work for so few people, in all honesty. And it's really a case of finding the right dosage that's working for your system at that point in time. It could change, you know, the difference between you probably treating your pond today than doing a 50% water change and treating it after that is going to be completely different because of the organic loading in the system change. So this is the thing that all medications are happening. It's just visually a lot easier to see with potassium permanganate because we've got a colour guide, you know, purple to brown. We can gauge the reaction time. We know when it's done. With a lot of the fluke medications and other stuff, we can't. So yeah, it's a tough one. But no, I don't think it's an increase. I don't think it's any different to any other year. I think we're at a point where new knowledge is coming forward, and yeah, as we learn more about it and trial it, I think we will see a point where people are starting to really get on top of this issue properly. So right, I am burning out, guys. I'm not going to lie. I've been chatting like a maniac for nearly an hour. So we'll probably just look for one more now, if we can. Have you got one you've had your eye on, Steve? Oh, there's one, Richard Potts. Oh, no, there we go. You beat me to it. Matthew, all right, we'll go back to her in a minute. Can you confirm when Tosai goes to Nisai? Some say in October, second year. Some say 1 year after usual spawning. Yeah, right. The typical Japanese thing, they make it as complicated as they possibly can, like having 3 alphabets and yeah, a million different ways to say one of something. So yeah, with the aging of koi, it's absolutely no different. So all you really need to remember, I mean, the most important thing is to know it in months, to be honest with you. But yeah, Tosai generally typically by the Japanese system turn to Nisai at the point of harvest, which is typically sort of October, November time. At that point, that is when they'll technically become Nisai in Japan. Although those Nisai in that early part of the season, October, November, are only typically like 18, 19 months old. So technically a year and a half. That's why it's probably more important to know the age in months than it is the actual age, because even, you know, Japanese Nisai at 2 years old can be, sorry, a Sanzai be only 2.5 years old at the point of being Sanzai. So it's yeah, it's a bit stupid really, because it's leaving people thinking, you know, a fish is 3 years old when technically it's only 2.5. There's a big gap there, big 6 months age gap. So yeah, probably more important to pay attention to the age of, but yes, typically when you're seeing it come October, that Tosai is typically becoming Nisai by the sort of guidelines and standards set in the marketplace. But that very new Nisai at that point is still only technically a year and a half, 2.5 years old, depending on where it's at. So yes, hope that answers that one, Matt, and I hope the new fish house is all going well for you, buddy. So yeah, last one I just picked out. What one book is a must-have for a new koi keeper when trying to learn koi appreciation? I would go with Koi 1 and Koi 2, written by Harold Bachman. I found them great books, to be honest with you. Just a nice source of information, because what you also get tied in there is a good background knowledge of the breeders, which is really important. You know, if you're really wanting to learn koi appreciation, you need to learn a good bit of information about the breeders. It's absolutely imperative that you do that. So they'd be the ones I go for. It's a great set, and to be honest with you, they're not. It's not on a point from appreciation perspective where they're absolutely just, you know, nitpicking at tiny, stupid, crazy things that I believe are pretty irrelevant in true koi appreciation. It's just a good guide and a solid sort of foundation there to pick up some basic facts that you can bring to the table. So there we have it, folks. What about Koi Talk magazine? Yeah, good point. That's an absolutely great one to get subscribed to if you're not already. You'll learn. I mean, koi appreciation, we do. That was actually quite poor selling from me there. So yeah, we do koi appreciation in there every month. We pick a variety and we show you absolutely top quality examples. They really are stunning. All Japan show winners, top quality photography from Jane Manarat in Thailand, and obviously explain the koi appreciation side of that, as well as other articles along the way that will learn. And it's very up to date knowledge as well, and very diverse. So yes, if you haven't subscribed, please do, or you can get all the copies of the back issues online as well. So thank you very much for all tuning in again, guys. We'll be back next week, and look forward to it. Hopefully, I'm not sure of the schedule, but we'll have a guest on then as well. But yeah, thanks for the questions, everything as usual. I'll see you then.